The Honey Badger Doesn't Care Chapter 1. The man who fixes things. The house was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that soothed, but the kind that pressed down. Heavy, airless, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Rachell Morrison sat at her father's old oak desk, the one carved with tiny scratches from his restless fingers. She used to tease him about them. Now, she traced them absent-mindedly, as if they might pulse with life and tell her what to do next. The cursor blinked on the screen, steady and indifferent. Her eyes burned from hours of reviewing numbers that refused to make sense. The final presentation was due in less than 6 hours, the one that could save her father's company from being devoured by men who saw employees as figures, not families. And then, without warning, the computer went black. The sound, the software cutting off, was so small it shouldn't have meant anything. But to Rachel, it was the sound of something snapping inside her. No, 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 she whispered, tapping the keys, pressing the power button again and again. Nothing. Just her reflection in the dark screen, pale, tired, hollow-eyed. A stranger. When it hit her that she'd just lost 2 hours of work, something hot and wild rose in her chest. She grabbed the nearest pen, slammed it down on the desk, and felt it crack in half. Her heart was pounding too fast. Her throat tightened. "Dad," she said aloud before she could stop herself. The word broke like glass. She stared at his photograph, Brian Morrison, smiling in that easy, disarming way that made everyone feel seen. "What am I supposed to do, Dad?" she whispered. "I'm trying. I really am." The house didn't answer. It never did. She took a deep breath and forced herself to move. She called her assistant, voice shaking just enough to betray her panic. "Call a tech. Emergency job. Tonight. I don't care how late." When she hung up, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror across the room, shoulders drawn tight, lips pressed thin. A woman who'd built her life around control, now watching it crumble piece by piece. She didn't know it yet, but help was already on the way, in the form of a man with calloused hands, a patient voice, and a little girl who carried sunlight in her pocket. "James, okay, Miss Boss Lady," James Grayson said, crouching to eye level with the tiny human currently fastening a pink glittery tool belt around her waist. "Are you ready to supervise this emergency mission?" Sonny's blue eyes went wide with seriousness. "Ready, Daddy. You have to remember rule number 1. He raised an eyebrow. "Which one is that again?" "Always fix things with love and snacks," she said solemnly. Then she grabbed her stuffed honey badger, Mr. Cuddles, who was missing one button eye and half his tail stuffing. "And Mr. Cuddles is coming too. He says computers are cranky when people yell at them." James chuckled, straightening. "Good point. We'll be gentle, then." He loaded his tools into the van, the evening air cool against his neck. The job had come in last minute. High priority, big house, client listed as Rachell Morrison. He recognized the name. Morrison Industries had once been a major contract for his old company, before life pulled him in a different direction. He glanced at Sunny buckling herself into her car seat, humming under her breath. 5 years old and already a force of nature. Sometimes he still couldn't believe how far they'd come. He remembered the hospital, the sterile smell, the empty cradle beside him. Emily's laughter echoing faintly in memory. The terror of holding a baby that first night, afraid she would sense how broken he felt. "Hey, Daddy," Sunny said softly, breaking him from the memory. "You okay?" He smiled faintly in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, kiddo. Just thinking." "About Mommy?" she asked. "Not sad, just curious." He nodded. "A little, but also about fixing a computer." She nodded wisely. "Then think happy thoughts. Mommy liked when you fixed stuff. Remember?" He did. And for once, the thought didn't hurt as much as it used to. Rachel, the doorbell rang just as Rachel was about to make her 4th cup of coffee. She exhaled shakily, straightened her blazer, and opened the door. "Ms. Morrison?" The voice was warm, low and steady, the kind of voice that grounded you without trying. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, with hair that needed a trim and eyes that looked like they'd seen storms and survived them. "I'm James Grayson," he said, holding out a hand. "You called about your computer." Beside him stood a small girl dressed like a fairy mechanic, sparkles, pink ribbons, and a miniature tool belt covered in stickers. The sight was so unexpected that Rachel's brain froze. "Hi," the girl chirped. "I'm Sunny. I'm Daddy's boss." She held out a crayon-colored business card. Rachel blinked, took it automatically, and read, "Sunny Grayson, Daddy's boss, fixer of problems, bringer of snacks." The edges of her lips twitched. And before she realized it, she was smiling. Really smiling. For the first time in a year. James's eyes caught hers, and something flickered there. Recognition maybe, or just understanding. "She takes her job seriously," he said. "I can see that," Rachel replied softly. "Don't worry, Ms. Morrison. We'll get your computer back up and running." "Thank you," she said. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she meant it in more ways than one. James inside, the house felt too big for the people in it. Too many corners filled with silence. He could sense the weight of grief. It lingered in framed photos, in the faint scent of old aftershave, in the untouched mug on the counter. While his laptop ran diagnostics, Sunny was chatting with Rachel in the living room, sipping hot chocolate. "So, Miss Rachel," Sunny said earnestly, "why do you want to save your company?" Rachel blinked at her. "That's a big question for a little girl." Sunny shrugged. "Big hearts ask big questions." Rachel laughed quietly. My dad built it, she said. He believed that if you take care of people, they'll take care of you. I guess I just don't want to let him down. James looked up from the desk and met her gaze. She wasn't talking to him, but something in her voice, the ache, the exhaustion, hit him square in the chest. Sounds like your dad was a good man, he said quietly. The best, she whispered. An hour later, as James was reassembling the computer, he noticed something strange, a small flash drive taped inside the casing, tucked away like a secret. Ms. Morrison, he called softly. You might want to see this. She came over, curiosity sharpening into unease. He handed her the drive, and when their fingers brushed, she felt the faintest spark of something. Not electricity, not attraction exactly, but aliveness. She inserted the drive. A single file appeared. Read this, Rachel. Her breath caught. It was her father's handwriting in the file name, unmistakable. For a long moment, she couldn't move. James and Sonny stood quietly nearby, sensing the shift. Then she clicked it open. The words filled the screen, her father's final message, written just weeks before his death. Words that would change everything. Chapter 2. The ghost in the machine. The cursor blinked, waiting. Rachel's pulse thudded in her ears. For a heartbeat, she could almost hear her father humming, that off-key tune he used to fill long silences. The air around her felt too still, too heavy, as if the whole house were listening with her. The file opened. Rachel, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong, and I'm not there to fix it. You were always the brave one, kid. You hid your heart behind ambition, but I saw through it. You cared too much. That was your strength, even when you thought it was your weakness. I have reason to believe someone close to me has been tampering with the company's accounts. I can't prove it yet, but I think Richard Evans is planning something that could destroy everything we built. If I don't make it into work one day, don't assume it was my heart that stopped on its own. You'll find what you need in the files labeled Beacon Project. Trust your instincts. You've always had better ones than mine. And Rachel, take care of your mother. She's tougher than she looks, but she'll need you. Let yourself grieve, but don't let it steal your joy. Remember, family isn't who you're born to. It's who you choose to stand beside when everything else falls apart. Love you always, Dad. The room blurred. For a long time, Rachel couldn't see the screen through her tears. James stood a respectful distance away, not speaking. Sonny, sensing the gravity of the moment, sat quietly beside him, holding Mr. Cuddles close. When Rachel finally turned, her expression was unreadable, equal parts shock, grief, and something fiercer. He knew, she whispered. He knew something was wrong. James met her eyes. Looks that way. Do you want me to? She shook her head sharply. No, this is something I need to handle. Then softer, as if realizing her tone, but thank you for finding it. He nodded. I just did my job. Rachel let out a faint laugh that sounded almost like a sob. No, you didn't. You did a lot more than that. Sonny tilted her head. Are you going to catch the bad guy? Rachel blinked, startled by the bluntness. The bad guy. The one your daddy said was hurting your family, Sonny said seriously. My daddy says you can't let mean people win, or they'll think they're the boss forever. Something in that innocent logic made Rachel's throat ache. You're very wise, Miss Boss. Sonny nodded proudly. I eat my vegetables. James grinned and ruffled her hair. And on that note, maybe we should give Ms. Morrison some space. But Rachel shook her head. Please, stay for a bit. I could use a moment to breathe. They ended up in the kitchen, the first time Rachel had used it for company since her father's funeral. She made tea, partly for something to do with her hands. James leaned against the counter, easy and unhurried, while Sonny played with refrigerator magnets. I don't know how to do this, Rachel said quietly. Running a company, taking care of my mom, trying to make sure I'm not letting everyone down. James studied her face. You're doing it. You just don't see it yet. She gave a small, bitter laugh. You sound like my dad. Smart man then, he said simply. There was a pause, long, comfortable, surprising. Rachel found herself watching him. There was something grounding about him, the way he moved with quiet confidence, as if life had taught him patience the hard way. How long have you been doing this? She asked. Tech repair. He shrugged. About 4 years. Before that, I ran a startup. Why'd you stop? His eyes softened, gaze flicking towards Sonny. Life happened. My wife passed when Sonny was born. Running a company didn't matter much after that. The honesty caught Rachel off guard. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. Not with bitterness, but peace. The kind that only comes from surviving something you thought would kill you. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He smiled faintly. Don't be. She gave me Sonny. That's enough. Sonny turned from the fridge and grinned. And Mr. Cuddles. James chuckled. And Mr. Cuddles, of course. For the first time in months, Rachel felt a warmth that wasn't laced with guilt. It wasn't the blinding kind of happiness she used to chase. It was gentler, smaller, like the faintest crack of sunlight through clouds. That night, after the Graysons left, she sat in her father's office and reopened the letter. She traced her fingers over the words family isn't who you're born to. Outside, rain whispered against the windows. Inside, the house didn't feel quite so empty. In another part of town, James carried a sleeping Sonny to bed. He paused in her doorway, watching her hug Mr. Cuddles tight, tiny fingers gripping the stuffed animal's torn paw. You did good today, kiddo, he murmured. You made someone smile. Sonny's eyes opened sleepily. She was sad, she mumbled. But she'll get better. You said people can heal if someone helps them remember how. He brushed a curl from her forehead. That's right. Then we'll help her, Sonny said, half asleep. That's our new mission. James smiled. Mission accepted. The next morning, Rachel printed her father's message and folded it into her jacket pocket. The board meeting was in 3 hours. Richard Evans would be there, the man her father had warned her about. And for the first time since Brian Morrison's death, she wasn't afraid. Chapter 3. The boardroom betrayal. Rachel. The Morrison Tower gleamed coldly in the morning sun, all glass and steel, a monument to her father's legacy. Once, Rachel had loved walking into this building. It had felt like stepping into his world, into the hum of creation and purpose. Now it felt like a battlefield. She stepped through the lobby, heels clicking against marble. Her assistant trailed behind, arms full of documents and coffee she wouldn't drink. Every face that greeted her wore the same strained politeness, sympathy, uncertainty, pity. They didn't see her as Brian Morrison's daughter anymore. They saw her as the heir trying not to drown. The boardroom door loomed ahead. 12 chairs, 11 men, one woman who wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. She straightened her blazer, the weight of her father's printed letter resting in her jacket pocket, and walked in. Richard Evans was already seated at the head of the table. He had been her father's oldest friend, tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who smiled without warmth. Rachel, he said smoothly, rising just enough to make it seem polite. You look tired. You've been working too hard. She smiled thinly. Someone has to. He chuckled. I remember when your father used to say that. Her pulse flickered at the mention of him. Yes, she said evenly. And he meant it. As the meeting began, Rachel presented her plans, a restructuring initiative designed to preserve jobs and stabilize the company's finances. She spoke clearly, her voice firm, but she could feel Richard's eyes on her, assessing, waiting. When she finished, he leaned back, folding his hands. Impressive, but perhaps a little idealistic. Your father was sentimental too. It's what made him loved, and what kept him from seeing the hard truths. Which are, she asked. That sometimes saving everyone means saving no one. You can't protect every employee. Sometimes you have to cut away the weak branches to keep the tree alive. Rachel's jaw tightened. My father believed that every person here mattered. I do too. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then maybe you're not ready for this seat, Rachel. Something inside her snapped. She reached into her jacket, pulled out the letter, and laid it flat on the table. My father didn't die of a heart attack, she said softly. He found out what you were doing. He left proof. A murmur rippled through the room. Richard's expression didn't falter, not much. Just a flicker, but it was enough. This is outrageous, he began, but she cut him off. The Beacon Project. You redirected company funds into shell accounts 6 weeks before my father's death. He was preparing to confront you. Her voice shook only once, but it didn't matter. The truth steadied her more than fear ever could. The board members stared. Someone whispered. Someone else began typing on their phone. Rachel stood tall. I'm not my father, but I carry his name, and I won't let you destroy what he built. When she walked out, her hands were trembling, but for the first time, not from doubt. James. The sound of Sonny's laughter echoed through the small apartment. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by screwdrivers and wires, helping him repair an old radio. Daddy, you have to be gentle, she instructed. Machines don't like it when you rush them. James grinned. You're becoming quite the technician. Uh-huh. Mr. Cuddles says I'm the best helper ever. He looked at her, that fierce little spark of life, and thought about all the nights he'd spent praying he wouldn't fail her. After Emily's death, the world had gone gray. He'd closed his company, sold his office, and moved back into his parents' old apartment. The silence used to crush him. Until one day, Sonny, just barely learning to talk, had toddled into his workshop with a wrench in her fist and said, "Help Daddy fix?" He'd laughed for the first time in months. That moment had saved him. Now, as he watched her work, he thought about Rachel Morrison, the sadness behind her eyes, the way her voice softened when she talked about her father. He recognized that pain, the kind that didn't just live in the heart, but in the bones. He didn't know why he couldn't stop thinking about her, only that something about her reminded him of the version of himself he'd once been, the one who thought responsibility meant carrying everything alone. Sonny looked up suddenly. Daddy, are you thinking about the lady with the sad eyes? James blinked. What makes you think that? She smiled knowingly. 'Cause you're making your thinking face. That means your heart's talking too loud. He laughed softly. You might be right, kiddo. Then we should help her, Sonny declared. That's what heroes do. He raised an eyebrow. Heroes, huh? And what's our plan then? Sonny grinned. We bring cookies. Rachel. By the time Rachel reached her car, the adrenaline had faded, leaving only exhaustion. She leaned against the door, exhaling a shaky breath. The world outside felt brighter somehow, not because her fight was over, but because she'd finally started it. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. J. Grayson, just checking in. How'd it go? She stared at the message for a moment, surprised at how much it meant that he'd asked. R. Morrison, survived. I think my dad would have been proud. There was a pause. Then, J. Grayson, he already was. Her throat tightened. Then another message popped up. S. Boss Daddy says we can bring cookies tomorrow. You need extra sparkles? Rachel smiled through her tears. Morrison. Always, Miss Boss. Always. That night, Maggie knocked softly on Rachel's door. I heard about the meeting, she said. Your father would be proud, honey. Rachel looked up, startled by the rare gentleness in her mother's voice. You think so? Maggie nodded. He always knew you'd be the one to carry it forward. I just wish. Her voice faltered. I wish we'd been kinder to each other this past year. Rachel stood, crossing the room. We were both lost, Mom. But maybe we can find our way back. They held each other, awkwardly at first, then fiercely, like two people remembering that love could still exist even after loss. Across town, James tucked Sonny into bed. Did the sad lady win? Sonny asked sleepily. James smiled. Yeah, kiddo. She did. Sonny yawned. Good. Then we can start Operation Smile Time tomorrow. Operation what now? She grinned, eyes closing. Secret mission. As James turned off the light, he wondered what tomorrow would bring. And why, for the first time in years, he was looking forward to finding out. Chapter 4. The slow return of light. The house smelled like cinnamon and lemon for the first time in a year. Maggie Morrison stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back in a messy bun that reminded Rachel of childhood mornings. Her mother humming to the radio, her father sneaking chocolate chips into the pancake batter. For months after Brian's death, Maggie had barely cooked. Meals had been takeout boxes in silence. Now, she was baking. Not because she wanted to, she admitted, but because grief doesn't like warm kitchens. Rachel leaned against the counter, watching her mother stir a bowl of cookie dough. Who told you that? Maggie smiled faintly. Your father. He said ovens heal more hearts than therapists ever could. The ache in Rachel's chest softened a little. He wasn't wrong. They worked in silence for a while, the air filled with the sound of spoons scraping bowls and the faint hiss of butter melting in the pan. Then the doorbell rang. Expecting someone? Maggie asked. Rachel blinked. Oh, maybe. Kinda. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Kinda. Before Rachel could answer, a familiar voice called from the front hall. Permission to enter the cookie zone. And then Sonny burst in, pink tool belt jingling, a box of glitter-covered cookies in her arms. Behind her, James followed, carrying a grocery bag and an apologetic smile. Hi, Miss Rachel. Hi, Miss Maggie. Sonny beamed. We brought reinforcements. Rachel blinked, startled. You baked cookies? Of course, Sonny said, as if it were obvious. Operation Smile Time. Phase 1. Cookies make everything better. James shrugged sheepishly. She wouldn't let me leave the house without them. Maggie laughed, really laughed, and the sound was so pure and unexpected that it startled everyone. Well, she said, wiping her eyes. You'd better come in before the oven feels neglected. They spent the afternoon baking. Flour dusted the counters, chocolate chips rolled under the table, and laughter, real, unguarded laughter, filled the air. Maggie taught Sonny how to roll dough between her palms, while James fixed the squeaky cabinet hinge near the sink. Rachel leaned against the counter, watching them all with a strange mixture of awe and longing. For so long, this house had been nothing but echo and shadow. Now it was full again, of noise, color, life. Hey, Ms. Rachel, Sonny said, licking a bit of dough off her thumb. Do you think sad hearts ever stop hurting? Rachel hesitated. I think, maybe they just learn how to grow around the hurt. Like trees around fences. Sonny nodded solemnly. Then we'll plant more trees. James chuckled. Sounds like a plan, kiddo. Maggie leaned over, whispering to Rachel. She's something, isn't she? She really is, Rachel murmured. Both of them. When the cookies were done, they gathered around the kitchen table, Maggie pouring tea, Sonny proudly arranging her glitter cookies in a neat spiral pattern. James sat quietly beside Rachel, the scent of cinnamon between them, the hum of warmth in the air. Thank you, Rachel said softly. He looked at her. For what? For bringing light back into this house. He smiled, gentle and unassuming. Wasn't me. That was her. Sonny giggled. Nope. It was teamwork. That evening, after the Graysons left, Rachel stood in the doorway watching her mother wash the last of the dishes. Maggie hummed the same tune Brian used to hum when he worked late. Mom, Rachel said quietly. Thank you for letting them come. Maggie dried her hands and turned. They're good people. And that little girl. She shook her head, smiling. She's like sunshine in sneakers. Rachel laughed softly. Yeah, she is. They sat together at the table, sharing quiet tea and memories, not the heavy, painful ones, but the ones that made them smile. For the first time since Brian's passing, Rachel didn't dread tomorrow. James later that night. James stood on his apartment balcony, watching city lights blink against the horizon. The air smelled faintly of rain. Sonny was asleep inside, Mr. Cuddles tucked under her chin. He could hear her soft snores through the open window. He thought about the Morrison house, how still it had been at first, how the silence seemed to ease once Sonny started talking. He hadn't expected to feel anything beyond professional duty when he took that call. But somehow, the sight of Rachel, shoulders squared, heart quietly breaking, had awakened something in him he hadn't realized was still alive. Compassion, maybe, or recognition. He took a sip of coffee and smiled faintly to himself. You'd like her, Emily, he said softly into the night. She's got that same stubborn fire you used to have. He closed his eyes, letting the quiet settle around him, the kind of quiet that didn't hurt anymore. Rachel the next morning, Rachel woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains. She hadn't realized she'd fallen asleep smiling until her cheeks ached. Downstairs, Maggie was already in the kitchen. "Morning," she said. "Guess what? I invited James and Sunny for dinner tonight." Rachel froze, half surprised, half delighted. "You what?" Her mother grinned. "Don't look at me like that. The little one wants to teach me how to make pink mashed potatoes. Apparently, it's a delicacy." Rachel laughed so hard she had to grip the counter. God help us. For the first time, the day felt full of possibility, not because everything was perfect, but because maybe it didn't have to be. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the first stars appeared, Rachel set the table. She could hear Sunny's laughter floating through the open window as James and Maggie debated whether glitter counted as a seasoning. When they finally sat down to eat, Rachel looked around the table. Her mother, James, Sunny, even Mr. Cuddles propped in a chair, and felt something warm bloom in her chest. It wasn't the absence of grief. It was the quiet coexistence of it, wrapped gently in love. Brian Morrison would have smiled at that. Chapter 5. When love learns to speak, the house was alive again. Not bustling, not loud, but breathing. There was laughter in the kitchen, soft music in the evenings, and a little girl who insisted every Friday should be pajama pancake night. Rachel hadn't realized how much she needed noise until she got used to hearing it again. Sunny had practically adopted her and Maggie as honorary relatives. James, always a little shy about overstepping boundaries, had started dropping by under the pretense of checking the Wi-Fi connection or fixing something that wasn't really broken. Maggie saw right through him, of course, but she let him come anyway. Rachel watched James from across the living room as he helped Sunny rebuild a model castle she'd knocked over. His hands were steady, patient, the kind of hands that could mend anything. Sunny sat cross-legged beside him, giving loud, bossy instructions. "Daddy, the pink turret goes here." "Yes, ma'am." "Not like that, sideways." "See, Miss Rachel says it looks like courage when you don't give up." James laughed softly. "Did she now?" Rachel turned crimson. "I was talking about," he met her eyes, smiling. "It fits, though." Their gaze lingered just a beat too long. Something warm pulsed quietly between them, subtle as sunlight through curtains. Rachel looked away first. "Coffee. Always." In the kitchen, Maggie hummed as she washed fruit. She gave Rachel a knowing glance. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one your father used to get when he realized I was more than just the secretary who brought him coffee." Rachel groaned. "Mom." Maggie chuckled. "Relax. I'm not saying rush into anything. I'm just saying." She handed her daughter a dish towel. "Maybe your heart's ready to come out of hibernation." Rachel didn't answer, but her smile gave her away. James that evening, after Sunny was tucked into bed at the Morrisons, James stepped outside for air. The porch creaked beneath him, the night cool and quiet. Rachel followed a moment later, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. He smiled. "You caught me." They sat side by side on the porch steps. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sounds were crickets and the distant rush of the ocean breeze. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. "It's strange. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm failing at everything." "You never were," he said softly. "You were just surviving." She looked down at her hands. "That's not the same thing as living." "No," James agreed. "But it's the first step back to it." She glanced at him then, really looked. The lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his expression carried both strength and kindness. He didn't flinch at her sadness. He met it with understanding. "You talk like someone who knows," she said. "I do." He told her about Emily, about the hospital room that went too quiet, about the baby he was afraid to hold because it meant admitting she was gone. Rachel didn't interrupt. She just listened, the way her father used to, when words mattered less than presence. "I spent years trying to fix things I couldn't," James said. "Then Sunny started smiling at me one morning, and I realized she didn't need perfection. She just needed me to stay." Rachel's eyes shone with unshed tears. "That's what I keep forgetting. Staying is its own kind of strength." He nodded, gaze drifting toward the stars. "It's all we can really promise anyone." For a long moment, they just sat there, 2 souls stitched together by shared loss and quiet hope. Then Rachel whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me what grace looks like." James smiled, his voice barely above a breath. "You don't need reminding, Rachel. You live it every day." Sunny from the upstairs window. Sunny peeked out through the curtains. Mr. Cuddles clutched to her chest. "They're doing it again," she whispered to the stuffed honey badger. "Doing what?" she imagined him saying in his gruff little voice. "Talking like sad penguins who don't know they're in love." Mr. Cuddles, as always, had no comment. Sunny sighed dramatically. "We might have to deploy Operation Hug Attack." Rachel the next morning, Rachel woke up to a note taped to her bedroom door in uneven crayon handwriting. "Mission alert. Operation Hug Attack starts at 9 a.m. sharp. No running. No sad faces. Only pancakes and hugs." Commander Sunny and Lieutenant Mr. Cuddles' sparkling heart. When she walked downstairs, she found Sunny standing on a chair, wearing her glittery tool belt and a pink apron that read Team Morrison Grayson. James was flipping pancakes. Maggie was laughing. "Morning, sleepyhead," Sunny announced. "You're just in time for the hug portion of breakfast." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "There's a hug portion?" Sunny nodded. "It's the best part." She jumped down from the chair and wrapped her arms around Rachel's waist. "You look like you needed it." Something inside Rachel, the last brittle piece of her grief, finally cracked open. She bent down, hugging Sonny back, whispering, "Thank you, Commander." "You're welcome, Captain." James watched them from the stove, eyes soft, heart quietly full. Later, when breakfast was over and Sonny had run off to the garden to show Maggie her latest glitter experiment, James stood beside Rachel at the sink, drying dishes. "I think your daughter might be running a secret matchmaking operation," Rachel said with a laugh. "Oh, I know she is," James said. "She's been trying to marry me off to her preschool teacher for months." Rachel laughed harder. "And you survived?" "Barely." He handed her a towel. "But I don't think that's who she's rooting for anymore." Their eyes met. Silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Rachel smiled, voice soft. "Then maybe she's smarter than both of us." James didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sometimes, love didn't need grand gestures. Sometimes, it began with pancakes and found families and the courage to speak without words. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Rachel stood on the porch again, the moonlight pale against the dark wood. She thought about her father, how he'd built his life on the belief that people, not profit, were what mattered most. And now, somehow, she understood. Because love wasn't a sudden thing. It was the slow accumulation of small mercies. A smile over coffee, a shared silence, a glitter-covered breakfast with people who refused to let you disappear into grief. And maybe that was enough. Chapter 6. The anniversary of the day arrived softly, like a breath exhaled. 1 year since Brian Morrison's passing. The calendar said October 12th, but for Rachel and Maggie, the date didn't need numbers. They could feel it in the air, in the stillness of morning, in the way sunlight seemed both gentle and fragile. The family, because that's what they'd become, gathered by the old oak in the cemetery. Maggie carried white roses. Rachel held a single envelope with her father's handwriting, something she'd kept sealed until today. James stood beside her, a quiet pillar of calm, with Sonny perched at his side, clutching a small bundle wrapped in tissue paper. Mr. Cuddles peeked from her backpack, one button eye gleaming. Rachel, she hadn't been sure she wanted to come. Last year, this place had broken her. Now, standing here with her mother's arm around her and the Graysons close behind, she felt steady. The ache was still there. Maybe it always would be, but it no longer hollowed her out. It just sat gently in her chest, like a memory you don't want to lose. She knelt by her father's headstone, tracing his name with her fingers. Brian Morrison, 1966 to 2024. Build something that outlives you. A smile flickered through her tears. "You did, Dad," she whispered. "You really did." Sonny crouched beside her, serious as only a 5-year-old could be during official ceremonies. She unwrapped her little bundle and revealed Mr. Cuddles, newly patched, a pink bow around his neck, and 2 matching button eyes. "I fixed him," she said proudly. "He wanted to stay here today. He says he owes your dad a thank you." Rachel blinked back tears. "A thank you?" Sonny nodded. "For making people brave." Mr. Cuddles says brave people help sad ones feel safe again. Rachel smiled. "Then he's welcome to stay." She placed Mr. Cuddles gently beside the flowers. For a moment, even the wind seemed to pause in reverence. Maggie stood a few steps back, watching her daughter, not just as a mother, but as a woman who had also walked through loss and come out the other side. When Brian died, she'd thought her heart had been buried with him. But now, looking at Rachel's quiet strength and the warmth of the Graysons standing beside them, she felt something else. Love didn't end. It changed shape. It found new ways to exist. She reached out and squeezed James's hand, the gesture unspoken but understood. "Thank you," she whispered. He looked startled. "For what?" "For being the kind of man who shows up." James, he wasn't sure what to say to that. He didn't feel extraordinary, just a man doing what he could to keep moving forward. But maybe that was enough. Maybe all any of them needed was someone who stayed when things were hardest. He glanced toward Rachel, who was standing now, sunlight on her hair, eyes soft with peace. She caught his gaze and smiled. Not the forced one she used to wear, but something real, open. James's heart ached in that sweet, familiar way that meant something had taken root inside him. They stood there together a while longer. No rush, no words. Just presence. Before they left, Rachel opened the envelope she'd been holding. Inside was a short note in her father's unmistakable handwriting. "Rachel, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't finish what we started. But I know you will. Remember, the company isn't the legacy. People are. Take care of them, and take care of yourself. And when it gets too heavy, let someone carry a little of it for you. Love, Dad." The paper blurred through her tears. She felt James's hand find hers. This time, she didn't pull away. That evening they returned to the Morrison house for dinner. Not a somber one, but a celebration. Sonny insisted on balloons. Maggie baked her husband's favorite pie. James grilled in the backyard, while Rachel set the table with her mother's old china. The air was full of chatter and light. After dinner, Sonny clambered onto a chair, clutching a new business card drawn in crayon. "Okay, everybody," she announced. "I made updates to our team." She cleared her throat dramatically. New company name: Team Honey Badger CEO, Daddy Co-CEO, Miss Rachel Chief Cookie Officer, Grandma Maggie Mascot, Mr. Cuddles, now retired but watching from the clouds. Rachel laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. James was red from trying not to laugh. Maggie wiped her eyes, smiling. That's a promotion if I've ever seen one. Sunny nodded proudly. Team Honey Badger doesn't give up. Ever. Rachel leaned down and kissed the top of Sunny's head. No, we don't. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Rachel and James sat once more on the porch, their quiet ritual. The air was cool and smelled faintly of rain. You okay? James asked softly. Rachel nodded. Yeah, for the first time in a long while. I am. They fell into silence, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything that had been lost and everything that had been found. Finally, she turned to him. You ever think about how strange it is, the people who end up saving us? James smiled. Every day. She took a breath, then reached out, covering his hand with hers. You didn't just fix my computer, James. You helped me remember how to live. He looked at her for a long moment, searching, steady, and then simply said, and you helped me remember how to love. There were no fireworks, no dramatic declarations. Just two people, side by side, hearts quietly speaking the same language. Inside, Sunny stirred in her sleep, clutching a newer, smaller Mr. Cuddles, one Rachel had helped her sew. Outside, under the soft hum of the stars, the world seemed to exhale. Epilogue. The Honey Badger way narrated by Sunny. Sometimes grown-ups forget how to smile. That's okay. They just need help remembering. Miss Rachel smiles all the time now. Daddy says it's because she's brave, but I think it's because we're her family. Grandma Maggie bakes cookies every Sunday, and she lets me put glitter in the frosting, just a little. Daddy still fixes things, but now he laughs more. And me? I'm working on Operation Forever Hugs. Because that's what honey badgers do. They don't give up, and they never stop loving their pack. The end. Afterward, the shape of healing grief doesn't end. That's the truth most of us spend our lives trying not to look at. It softens, it shifts, it finds new corners of the heart to live in, but it never truly disappears. What does change is what grows around it. The laughter that returns, the friendships that anchor you, the unexpected moments of grace that remind you the world is still full of light. The Honey Badger Doesn't Care isn't really a story about loss. It's a story about what happens after, the quiet, unseen work of healing. The administrative tasks, the empty chairs, the strange guilt of smiling again when you thought you never would. Rachel's journey began in silence, but ended in song, the kind made not of perfect notes, but of human voices learning how to harmonize again. James's life began again the moment he realized that survival could be a form of love. Maggie discovered that letting go didn't mean forgetting. And Sunny, fierce, glitter-streaked, 5-year-old Sunny, reminded everyone that joy is not the opposite of grief, but its most beautiful rebellion. Found family isn't always about replacing what was lost. It's about continuing the story, together. We heal not by erasing the pain, but by choosing, over and over again, to love anyway. And maybe that's what the Honey Badger was trying to teach all along. To face the world, bruised but unbroken, to protect what matters, to love without fear, and to never, ever give up.